Okay, let's unpack this. How do you really make sense of a world that feels like it's spinning faster than ever? News cycles are just relentless, and it can genuinely feel impossible to keep up sometimes. But what if you could take a single ordinary day, let's say July 24, 2025, and really pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, the key insights from a whole stack of different sources? That's exactly what we're trying to do today. This isn't just, a news recap. Think of it more like a curated journey. We want to uncover connections, maybe some surprising facts, and get to that deeper so what behind the headlines.
Yeah, and what's really illuminating, I think, about focusing on just one day is how events that seem totally separate can actually, when you look closely, show these profound underlying trends, these forces that are actively shaping our world, even on a day that might just seem, well, random at first glance.
Absolutely. And we've pulled from a really broad spectrum here, major news outlets, sure, but also specialized reports, some deeper analyses, all to make sure you get a truly well-rounded picture, multidimensional. Our goal, to give you that essential shortcut to being well-informed, but without feeling completely overloaded. So let's jump straight into July 24, 2025. We're going to start by looking at some of the most pressing global issues, humanitarian crises, political flashpoints. And we really have to begin with the situation in Gaza, which is just, well, dire and getting worse. On this day, July 24th, the World Health Organization actually declared what they called man-made mass starvation in Gaza. And that's not just a grim label. They're directly attributing it to Israel's ongoing blockade and military campaign. Reports from Oxfam and actually over 100 other NGO coalitions painted this truly shocking picture, describing people getting as little as one meal every 3 days. How do we even begin to understand the complexity here, with the accusations and counter-accusations flying?
Right. It's incredibly deep and complex, as you said. You have, on one side, the UN repeatedly accusing Israel of severely restricting critical supplies, vital aid, but then on the other side, Israeli officials argue very strongly that Hamas bears significant blame, diverting aid, deliberately perpetuating the violence. It's this deeply polarized narrative, and it's led to intense international pressure for, ceasefire talks, humanitarian corridors, yet it all remains mired in these profound legal and diplomatic controversies. What's crucial here, I think, beyond the raw numbers, is seeing this as a catastrophic failure of basic human systems.
And then making that already bleak picture even worse, on the same day, July 24th, the U.S. announced it was pulling out of the Gaza ceasefire talks. They squarely blamed Hamas for obstructing the negotiations. The immediate impact seems obvious. Dimmer ceasefire prospects, terrifying fears of more civilian harm. But what are the wider diplomatic implications of the U.S. stepping back like that?
Well, that withdrawal isn't just about one negotiation collapsing. It really raises big questions about U.S. diplomatic credibility, its role as a perceived impartial broker in the region. When the U.S. exits like that, it often creates a vacuum, or at least shifts the whole geopolitical chessboard. We could definitely see regional players like Egypt and Qatar stepping into much larger, maybe more decisive mediation roles,
Yeah.
potentially reshaping future diplomatic paths without direct U.S. leadership, which is a significant shift.
Okay, and speaking of really contentious geopolitical moves, on that very same day, July 24th, we saw a very bold, some would say provocative move from the Israeli Knesset. They approved a non-binding motion to annex the occupied West Bank. Now, this move, as many people know, it has deep roots in historical religious claims to the territory going back to the 1967 war.
Yeah.
How are the different sides framing this decision, and what was the immediate international reaction?
So, Israeli leaders framed it primarily as reclaiming national heritage and also as an essential security measure. But the Palestinian Authority immediately condemned it, calling it a flagrant violation of international law. No ambiguity there. And the international alarm was swift, it was widespread. Warnings came flying about derailing any chance of a two-state solution, and pretty strong predictions of wider regional instability. This move isn't just symbolic. It fundamentally challenges the legal and political foundations that decades of peace efforts have been built on. It's a big deal.
Right. And as we've seen, conflict keeps rippling across different regions. But away from the familiar hotspots, July 24th also saw a dangerous escalation over in Southeast Asia. A border conflict between Thailand and Cambodia, which had been simmering, suddenly erupted into open military conflict. The underlying causes, there seemed to be a complex mix: territorial disputes, ethnic rivalries, resource competition too, especially near that ancient Priya Vihar temple site. What were the immediate consequences of this flare-up? It seemed quite sudden.
Yeah, it escalated quickly and tragically came with a heavy human cost. As of that day, July 24th, reports confirmed at least 15 people dead, and over 58,000 people Many women and children had fled their homes. It created a rapidly escalating humanitarian crisis right there on the border. And this situation immediately triggered significant concern, regionally and internationally. Organizations like ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and the UN voiced deep worries about broader destabilization in what's already a pretty delicate region.
Okay, let's shift back to the Middle East for a moment. There was maybe a glimmer, however faint, of diplomacy happening. On July 24th, Iran and European diplomats held their first formal meeting since that recent conflict, the one involving Iran, Israel, and the U.S. This meeting was in Istanbul. The aim was to diffuse nuclear tensions. What exactly are the stakes in these renewed talks? They must be incredibly high.
Oh, unbelievably high. They determine not just the future of Iran's nuclear program, but potentially the stability of the entire region. Iran is pushing hard for robust security guarantees. Meanwhile, its European counterparts are pressing for strict oversight, rigorous compliance with non-proliferation commitments. And hanging over all of this is the looming threat of renewed or maybe even expanded sanctions. What's really crucial to get here is that the outcome could genuinely define the future security architecture of the whole Middle East. It's that significant.
Okay. Meanwhile, over in the Indo-Pacific, also on July 24th, we saw these massive military exercises. 19 nations involved, spanning the Pacific, the South China Sea, critical shipping lanes. And the stated purpose, or at least the simulation, was defense against perceived Chinese expansionism. How are these exercises being interpreted by the different powers involved? Must be quite differently.
Oh, absolutely. Sharply contrasting reactions. China condemned them as direct provocations, accusing the participating nations of destabilizing the region, fueling an arms race. Pretty strong language. On the other hand, Western officials characterized them as purely defensive, essential, they argued, for upholding international law and freedom of navigation. From an analytical standpoint, what these exercises really highlight is this delicate balance. There's potential for dangerous miscalculation, for sure, but there's also a clear strategic intent there to deter aggression and fundamentally recalibrate power balances across Asia.
Right. Let's pivot now to Ukraine. President Zelensky made a significant move on July 24th. He reversed some controversial anti-corruption reforms that had drawn criticism. Specifically, he restored independence and procedural powers to key anti-corruption bodies, NBU, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, and SAPO, the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office. What prompted this reversal, and what are the broader implications for Ukraine, especially regarding its allies?
Well, this reversal is pretty directly a crucial step for Ukraine's ongoing efforts to join the EU. It's a prerequisite, really. It came after some intense domestic protests, but also significant criticism from key EU allies. There were direct consultations with figures like German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer involved. So this move dramatically improves Ukraine's standing with its Western partners. And crucially, it directly counters the Kremlin's persistent narrative about Ukraine's governance being inherently corrupt. That's a major win for Kyiv on the diplomatic front.
Interesting. Okay, and one last piece on the global stage for now. A significant diplomatic shift. The U.S. finalized its withdrawal from UNESCO between July 23rd and 24th, ending 70 years of membership. The Trump administration had cited long-standing concerns about bias, mismanagement within the organization. What are the repercussions of this departure?
Well, UNESCO leaders themselves openly lamented the loss. They talked about the profound impact of losing U.S. support for global education and culture programs, which often rely heavily on U.S. funding and expertise. Critics worry this departure further isolates the U.S. from these vital global governance frameworks, and it significantly weakens funding for critical initiatives worldwide. The key insight, perhaps, is the impact on American soft power. Withdrawing from bodies like UNESCO can diminish U.S. influence in shaping global norms in education, science, culture.
Okay, let's shift our gaze now to the U.S., because July 24th also saw some really remarkable, maybe even pivotal shifts happening domestically. In politics, law. On that day, a federal appeals court delivered a truly significant ruling. It blocked former President Trump's attempt to end birthright citizenship. The court found it unconstitutional, saying it conflicted directly with the 14th Amendment's plain language. How profound is this ruling in the larger context?
It's very profound. By grounding itself so squarely in the 14th Amendment's actual text, the plain language, it doesn't just block one specific policy, it sets a powerful legal precedent. It subtly but firmly reinforces the judiciary's role as a check on executive attempts to reinterpret fundamental constitutional principles. We're seeing that tension play out elsewhere, too. So, while it was hailed as a major victory by civil rights and immigrant rights groups, it also drew strong criticism from some conservative voices who see it as a judicial overreach.
Right. Also on July 24th, the Trump administration rolled out some executive orders dealing with artificial intelligence. They aim to relax federal oversight of AI and controversially ban models seen as influenced by ideological frameworks such as diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI. That sounds like a really sweeping move. What are the arguments being made here for and against?
Well, the proponents argue that this deregulation will significantly accelerate U.S. leadership in AI, cut the red tape, foster innovation, that kind of thing. However, the critics, and that includes prominent groups like the ACLU, warn it could profoundly undermine safety, accountability, and critically, reinforce existing biases within these automated systems. They denounced it as executive overreach, raising serious legal questions about using presidential power like this without clear congressional approval. It could fundamentally reshape AI ethics and development in the U.S.
And then there's the Jeffrey Epstein files controversy, which just keeps going. On July 24th, we saw bipartisan calls in Congress for the Justice Department to finally release records related to Epstein. Lawmakers were even threatening subpoenas. This connects obviously to all the ongoing public scrutiny, speculation about high-profile figures, maybe a cover-up. But there was a really surprising twist that day, too, wasn't there?
Absolutely. What was truly unexpected and reported on July 24th itself was that the Trump administration reportedly met with Ghislaine Maxwell, the jailed Epstein associate, in a federal facility. Now, the stated reason was apparently cooperation in ongoing probes, but it immediately sparked fresh controversy, intense questions about the executive branch's direct involvement. Many analysts are warning that this kind of interaction could further erode crucial norms around the separation of powers and maybe the perceived independence of federal investigations. It raises eyebrows, to say the least.
Yeah, definitely raises questions. Okay, the Supreme Court also weighed in on July 24th. A 6-3 decision. They ruled in favor of the Trump administration, blocking a lower court order. That order would have allowed Biden-appointed Democrats to stay on the Consumer Product Safety Commission, the CPSC. That's the agency overseeing safety for thousands of consumer products. What does this specific ruling tell us about the broader struggle over federal agencies?
Right. This ruling is a significant piece in a much larger puzzle. It illustrates these ongoing attempts by presidents to assert greater control over federal agencies. And it fuels a fundamental debate in American governance. Is this just a president shaping the government's agenda, which voters might expect? Or is it a worrying trend towards politicizing independent regulatory bodies? The Supreme Court's decision here clearly strengthens the executive's hand in shaping the composition and therefore the direction of these critical commissions.
Okay. And lastly, on the domestic front for this section, Columbia University agreed to a huge settlement on July 24th, $221 million. This was related to federal anti-discrimination investigations stemming from allegations about exclusionary scholarships targeting undocumented DACA recipients and foreign students. What are the key takeaways from this landmark settlement?
Well, advocates hailed it as a really meaningful acknowledgement of the rights of undocumented students, a victory for educational equity. However, some critics argue that while the dollar amount is significant, it doesn't fully address the broader systemic policy issues involved. It could potentially prompt policy reviews at other universities facing similar questions about access for undocumented populations. The key takeaway is definitely increased scrutiny on how institutions balance federal rules with social inclusion efforts.
Okay, let's pivot now. We're going to look at the dynamic world of business and also the powerful, sometimes unforgiving forces of nature. We saw some truly historic business news on July 24th. U.S. rail giants Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern announced plans for a coast-to-coast merger. The aim is to create this unified rail system, streamlining transcontinental logistics. What are the potential benefits, and maybe more importantly, the concerns around such a massive consolidation?
Yeah, this merger could really reshape U.S. logistics. Potential benefits, reduced shipping times, maybe even lower freight costs for businesses. That's the promise. However, regulators, shippers, labor groups, they're all watching this extremely closely. The primary concerns revolve around significant antitrust impacts, the potential for service monopolization in some areas, and the need for robust protections for jobs and safety standards. The big question is whether those efficiency gains will outweigh the risks of reduced competition.
Right. And in other major merger news on the same day, the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, approved Skydance Media's $8 billion acquisition of Paramount Global. That is huge news for Hollywood, isn't it?
It absolutely is. This deal could fundamentally reshape the Hollywood landscape. It impacts everything from content diversity, intellectual property strategies, to the competitive dynamics across the whole entertainment industry. Critics have voiced serious concerns about further media consolidation. You have a single company now controlling such broad content pipelines. That raises questions about consumer choice, diverse storytelling.
Hmm. Okay, on a more positive economic note, perhaps. July 24th brought some undeniably good news from the markets. Both the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq reached all-time highs. What exactly fueled those surges? Was it just one thing?
It was driven by multiple factors, really, creating this wave of investor optimism. We saw reports of new, potentially promising trade frameworks involving the US, Japan, the Philippines, Indonesia. There was also anticipation of a potential US-EU agreement simmering. And crucially, strong corporate earnings, especially from tech giants like Alphabet, Google's parent company, provided a strong tailwind. However, there's a crucial debate still simmering among analysts. Are these valuations truly reflective of underlying economic strength? Or are they getting increasingly elevated, hinting at maybe some market froth? That's the billion-dollar question, really.
Always is. Okay, now shifting to nature's fury, which also left its mark on July 24th. The northern Philippines was battered by a devastating tropical storm, Typhoon Kome. It tragically exacerbated deadly flooding and landslides already occurring. The grim toll reported that day. At least 25 lives lost, over 278,000 residents evacuated. What context should we keep in mind when looking at an event like this?
Well, what's deeply concerning here is that experts are increasingly connecting these events to the broader context of climate change. The argument is that it's contributing to increasingly intense, more unpredictable monsoon storms in that region and others. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. declared a state of calamity, naturally, and there were urgent appeals for international aid. It just stresses the profound need for greater disaster resilience planning, not just in the Philippines, but across vulnerable regions globally. It's a stark reminder of our changing planet.
Yeah, absolutely. And bringing that closer to home, the U.S. was grappling with its own severe weather on July 24th. Millions were enduring triple-digit temperatures from this expansive heat dome. Meanwhile, severe thunderstorms were hitting the Midwest, and flash floods impacted the South. What are the deeper implications of these recurring severe weather events here in the U.S.?
Well, these events are entirely consistent with the broader climate volatility scientists have been talking about, the long-warned impacts of global warming. They highlight significant health risks, particularly for vulnerable populations, the elderly, those without AC, and substantial agricultural losses, too. Critically, these incidents intensify the fierce national debates we're having over climate adaptation strategies and the urgent need for more resilient infrastructure investment. It underscores how deeply intertwined our daily lives now are with these environmental shifts.
Right. Finally, for this section, some tragic news out of Russia. A passenger jet crashed in Russia's Amur region on July 24th, tragically killing all 48 people on board. Does this tragedy highlight any particular vulnerability there, or is it just a grim reminder of air travel risks generally?
Unfortunately, this incident does raise some recurring concerns about air safety in certain Russian regions. These are often exacerbated by factors related to maintenance, funding, and sometimes extremely challenging weather conditions. Early reports suggested a combination of severe weather and possible technical failure contributed to this accident. It reminds us that despite huge advancements, air travel always carries inherent risks, and rigorous oversight remains absolutely paramount.
Okay, now let's transition to a more diverse set of stories. We'll highlight moments of discovery, some significant challenges in human systems, and also some poignant cultural reflection. And what a discovery to start with. Some genuinely exciting astronomical news announced back in July 2025. The discovery of Comet 3 Iatolis. It's only the third known interstellar object ever detected passing through our solar system. It was actually first spotted on July 1st.
How rare and significant is an event like this for astronomers?
Oh, it's truly a landmark event. These interstellar objects are incredibly rare. Their significance really cannot be overstated. They offer scientists direct access to pristine samples, material from beyond our sun's immediate influence. Think about that. It could potentially unlock profound clues about other planetary systems, maybe even the fundamental building blocks of life itself. Imagine studying material from another star system right here in our cosmic backyard. It's a potential game changer for astrobiology.
Wow. Okay, switching to the medical front. There was a major breakthrough announced on July 24th in cancer immunotherapy. Researchers found that a virus from black-eyed peas, it's called the cowpea mosaic virus, shows extraordinary promise. Apparently, it acts as a catalyst, activating the immune system against cancer cells, but crucially, without actually infecting human cells.
Yeah.
This sounds almost too good to be true. What are the practical implications?
The potential here is truly remarkable. This could represent a low-cost, scalable, and safe approach to cancer immunotherapy. That's the hope. Expert opinion seems overwhelmingly positive, emphasizing the possibility of democratizing access to effective treatment worldwide, especially given the low cost of the source material Ps. Now, the usual caution applies, of course, it needs late-stage clinical trials, but the initial findings suggest a groundbreaking new pathway for treatment that could change millions of lives down the road.
That's incredible. Okay, shifting now to a significant challenge in healthcare. Thousands of doctors across England began a historic 5-day strike on July 24th. This was over long-standing disputes about pay and working conditions within the NHS, the National Health Service. What's driving this unprecedented action? What kind of impact is it having?
Yeah, this strike needs to be seen in the context of mounting systemic pressures on the NHS, chronic funding challenges, severe staff shortages, widespread burnout among medical professionals has been building for years. Public reaction seems quite mixed. Many people sympathize deeply with the doctors, recognizing their immense workload and dedication. But there are also, understandably, serious concerns about delayed treatments and the impact on patient care during the strike. It raises a critical question. How will the government balance tight budget constraints with the urgent need for a sustainable, healthy healthcare workforce for the long term? It's a tough balancing act.
Indeed. Now, as a significant story of justice unfolded on July 24th, the International Criminal Court, the ICC, convicted and imprisoned militia leaders from the Central African Republic. They were convicted for orchestrating systematic anti-Muslim attacks. This sends a powerful message, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. This marks one of the ICC's first rulings directly addressing religious violence in this AR. It represents a real breakthrough for international accountability for such heinous crimes. While human rights groups have hailed the judgment as a crucial deterrent against future abuses, it's worth noting some political figures in this AR have criticized it as unwelcome Western intervention. So rebuilding trust and achieving true peace in the region remains a long, arduous process. But this ruling is undeniably a significant step towards justice.
Okay. In U.S. legal news, Brian Koberger was sentenced on July 24th. He received multiple life sentences for the horrific 2022 murders of 4 University of Idaho students. Beyond the legal outcome itself, what broader discussions has this tragic case ignited?
Well, the sentencing hearing included incredibly emotional, just gut-wrenching statements from the victims' families. They powerfully underscored the crime's lasting impact, not just on them, but on an entire community. The case has also raised broader, unsettling questions about campus safety, the pervasive issue of mental health awareness, and maybe the effectiveness of our legal system's response to violent crime, especially in environments often perceived as safe.
And finally today, a moment of cultural reflection. The passing of wrestling icon Terry Bollea, much better known as Hulk Hogan, on July 24th. He was 71, died from cardiac arrest. For so many people, he was just larger than life. What is his enduring legacy?
Oh, his legacy is truly immense. It reaches far beyond the wrestling ring. He was absolutely pivotal in propelling professional wrestling into mainstream entertainment, especially in the 1980s and 90s. He transformed it into a global spectacle. He became a genuine pop culture phenomenon. His passing has, predictably, led to widespread tributes. But it's also sparked deeper discussions about the intense physical toll of that profession, professional wrestling, and his undeniable transformative impact on the entire industry and popular culture worldwide. He essentially taught a generation, say your prayers, take your vitamins, believe in yourself. That was his thing.
Right. So what does this all mean? We've just taken this deep dive into a single day, July 24, 2025.
Yeah.
We've gone across the globe looking at the interconnectedness of conflicts, explored these dynamic shifts in U.S. politics and law. We've witnessed the raw power of nature's fury and celebrated the continuous march of human endeavor in science, in culture. It's a lot to take in from just one day. But there seems to be a consistent thread here, doesn't there?
Absolutely. I think if you look at the larger mosaic, this snapshot of July 24th really highlights how critical thinking isn't just, an academic exercise. It's essential for navigating this world that's just overloaded with information, understanding the nuances behind these headlines, going beyond the surface that truly empowers you, the listener, the learner, to make sense of the constant flow and see the deeper currents at play.
So as you reflect on this single day, what stands out to you? What do you see as the most significant ripple effect that maybe these events combined might have on the future world collectively building? That's the question we really encourage you to mull over. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive, and we really encourage your continued curiosity because the world is always unfolding and there's always more to learn.